Okay, so imagine you're playing chess, and you make a move, and then your opponent makes a move, and suddenly you realize, wait, I can't go forward, I can't go back. Every single option I have leads to something bad. That's called being in a trap. And right now, that's exactly where America finds itself with this war against Iran. Not because America is weak, not because Iran is some kind of superpower, but because of how wars work, how money works, and how the whole world is connected in ways most people never think about. So today, I want to break this down for you in the simplest way possible. Let's get into it. Here's something school doesn't really teach you about wars. Once they start, they take on a life of their own. Think about it like an avalanche. You're up on a snowy mountain, someone nudges a little pile of snow, just a tiny push, and at first it's small, manageable, almost nothing. But then it starts picking up speed. It picks up more snow, more weight, more momentum, and before long you've got this massive, unstoppable wall of destruction crashing down the mountain, and absolutely nobody can stop it just by deciding to stop it. The physics take over. Wars are like that. Look at Ukraine. When that war started in early 2022, people on both sides knew that the fighting was costing them enormously. Soldiers dying, cities destroyed, economies wrecked, families torn apart. Both Russia and Ukraine could clearly see that a negotiated deal would save everyone a lot of pain. And yet, 3-4 years later, that war is still going, still grinding, still chewing through lives and money every single day. Why? Because stopping a war means someone has to admit they lost. Someone has to stand up in front of their people and say, we didn't get what we wanted, we're going home. And that is one of the hardest things any leader can ever do. It feels like humiliation. It feels like betrayal. So instead, they keep going. They tell themselves just a little longer, just one more push. We'll turn this around, and it will all have been worth it. And the avalanche keeps rolling. Now, here's the thing about America's situation with Iran. It's even more complicated than Ukraine, because even if America's leaders woke up tomorrow morning and said, okay, we want out, we want a ceasefire, let's end this, they genuinely cannot, not in any clean way, not without triggering a chain of consequences so severe that it might actually be worse than just continuing the war. That sounds crazy, right? How can stopping be worse than continuing? Let me show you exactly how. Picture this. America decides it wants peace. So someone picks up the phone or sends a secret message through a third country, maybe Oman or Qatar, because that's how these things actually work, and they say to Iran, hey, let's talk, let's make a deal. Iran picks up, and Iran says, great, here's what we want. First thing Iran says, pay us, and not a little. We're talking roughly $1 trillion in compensation for the damage from this war, for decades of economic sanctions that crushed Iranian families, for all the ways America squeezed their economy over the years. Iran's argument is basically, you hurt us, now you owe us. Second thing Iran says, and this is the big one, leave. Not just scale back, not just reduce, leave. Pack up every military base in the Middle East, bring every soldier home, remove every aircraft carrier from the region. Promise never to come back, permanently. Iran's logic here is actually pretty easy to understand if you think about it from their perspective. They're basically saying, the only way we can ever feel truly safe is if America can never do this to us again. Makes sense for them, right? But here's where it all falls apart for America. Because the moment America agrees to those terms and actually packs up and leaves the Middle East, something terrifying happens. Not in Iran, not in the Middle East. It starts happening in the global economy, and it ripples outward like a shockwave. Right now, there's a group of countries sitting around the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, called the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. And here's the thing about all these countries. They're incredibly wealthy from oil. They're also not exactly military superpowers. What keeps them safe? What keeps them independent? What stops bigger, more aggressive neighbors from pushing them around? America. Specifically, American military power, American bases in the region, American aircraft carriers parked nearby, American defense agreements. The United States is basically the bodyguard for all of these countries. Now imagine the bodyguard walks away. Suddenly, those countries have to figure out a new arrangement, and the only country in the region with real military muscle, the only country that can project power and control access to the waterways those Gulf countries need, is Iran. So what do Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar do? They don't have a lot of options. They start making nice with Iran. They start accommodating Iranian interests. They essentially become countries that have to do what Iran says, at least to some degree. That's what political scientists call becoming a client state. You're technically independent, but the bigger power next door has enormous influence over your decisions. That's domino number one, and now it triggers domino number two. Okay, this one requires a tiny bit of financial explanation, but I promise to keep it simple.
You've probably heard that the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. But what does that actually mean and why does it matter? Here's the simple version. For most of the past several decades, oil, the thing that basically powers the entire global economy, has been bought and sold in US dollars. You want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia? You need US dollars to do it. You want natural gas from Qatar? US dollars. Every country in the world that needs energy, which is basically every country in the world, has to hold US dollars to buy it. That creates this massive, permanent global demand for American currency. Every country is basically saying, we need dollars, so let's make sure we always have some. That keeps the dollar strong. That keeps America's financial system humming. And then here's the second part. Those Gulf countries earn enormous amounts of dollars from selling their oil. What do they do with all those dollars? They invest them back into America. They buy US government bonds. They pour money into American financial markets. It's like a giant recycling loop. Oil gets sold for dollars, dollars flow to the Gulf reinvests dollars back into America, America uses that investment to keep functioning even with mind-boggling levels of debt. How much debt are we talking? America is currently sitting on roughly $36 to $39 trillion in debt. That is not a typo. Trillion, with a T. The only reason America can carry that much debt without collapsing is because the rest of the world keeps buying dollars and American debt instruments. And the petrodollar system is a huge part of what makes that happen. Now here's the part that should make you put your phone down for a second, because this isn't some future nightmare scenario. This is already starting to happen, right now. Iran has reportedly begun allowing certain ships through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important waterways on Earth, the narrow choke point through which something like 20% of the world's oil passes, based on whether those ships are paying in Chinese yuan, not dollars, yuan. Iran is literally already using access to that strait as a tool to push trade away from the US dollar and toward Chinese currency. Think about what that means. Iran is already in the middle of this conflict, actively chipping away at the petrodollar system. They're not waiting for some future peace deal to start dismantling American financial dominance. They're doing it right now, one ship at a time. And this is exactly what would accelerate dramatically if America withdrew and those Gulf countries fell under Iranian influence. They would no longer have any reason to sell oil in US dollars. Iran wouldn't even have to pressure them that hard. The blueprint is already being laid out in the Strait of Hormuz today. The whole recycling loop breaks. The global demand for dollars drops. Countries that used to automatically reach for dollars start reaching for yuan instead. America suddenly has to figure out how to service $36 to $39 trillion in debt without the same level of foreign investment propping it up. That is a 5-alarm financial emergency. That's not the economy gets a little rough. That's potentially the kind of economic crisis that reshapes countries for generations. And the unsettling thing is, unlike the other dominoes which are still theoretical, this one has already started to tip.
Domino number 3. Asia gets nervous. Stay with me here, because we're about to travel to the other side of the world. Japan and South Korea are watching everything happening in this war very closely. And they're doing something very rational. They're asking themselves a question. If America is struggling this much against Iran, can America actually protect us if China or North Korea decides to make a move? Right now, both Japan and South Korea rely heavily on American military protection, American bases, American troops, American defense treaties. Their whole national security strategy is built around the assumption that America has their back. But if America withdraws from the Middle East under pressure, if America shows that when things get tough, it pulls out, Japan and South Korea look at that and think, that could be us someday. We can't bet our entire survival on that promise. So they start building their own military capabilities. Japan, which has been famously pacifist since the end of World War II, like constitutionally committed to not having a real military, starts talking about the biggest military expansion since 1945. That process accelerates massively if America appears to be retreating from global commitments. What does this mean for America? It means countries that used to buy American weapons, host American bases, and integrate into American-led security arrangements start doing their own thing. Another piece of American global influence breaks off and floats away. Domino number 4. Europe does the math. Now let's hop over to Europe. Europe has been supporting America's confrontation with Russia over Ukraine. That's been expensive, economically, politically, in terms of refugees and energy costs. European countries have paid a real price for staying aligned with American policy. But here's the calculation European leaders are going to make if America withdraws from the Middle East. They're going to say, wait, if America is pulling back from the Middle East, one of the most strategically important regions on Earth, what does that tell us about American reliability? If America retreats when things get hard, why are we continuing to sacrifice so much to support American strategy in Ukraine? And the logical conclusion? Start negotiating with Russia. Make peace on whatever terms you can get. Stop bleeding for a war that your most important ally seems to be stepping back from anyway. The moment Europe does that, the alliance system America has spent 80 years building starts to crack. NATO starts losing coherence. America's ability to organize and lead the Western world in a unified direction starts evaporating. Domino number 5. The dollar's big demotion. Add all of that together. The petrodollar is weakening, Asian allies are drifting, Europe is fracturing, global confidence in America as the dominant, reliable superpower is shaking. What happens to the US dollar? It starts losing its special status. Countries that used to automatically hold dollars as their reserve currency start diversifying, holding more Chinese yuan, more euros, more gold. The global demand for dollars that props up the entire American financial system keeps shrinking. And America, remember, is sitting on that mountain of debt. Without that global dollar demand, servicing that debt becomes a genuine crisis. Not uncomfortable, not we need to tighten our belts. We're talking the kind of crisis that could fundamentally change American standard of living, the country's ability to project power, and its role in the world. So that's the trap. Staying in the war is painful and expensive, but leaving in a way that looks like defeat or surrender triggers this entire chain of events that might be even worse. Bad option A, worse option B. That's the choice. Fine, let's just win then. Why, that's also complicated. Okay, so at this point, you might be thinking what I would think, which is, well, if you can't leave and you can't negotiate, then just win. Just go in hard, defeat Iran, end it quickly, and get out as a winner. Problem solved. I totally get that instinct, but here's why that's a lot easier to say than to do. One scenario that military strategists talk about involves hitting Iran's oil export infrastructure, specifically a place called Karg Island, which handles a huge chunk of Iran's oil exports. The idea is, hit their money supply, cripple their ability to fund the war, and force them to the table from a position of weakness. On paper, that sounds logical. Disrupt their oil revenue, apply economic pressure, show strength, maybe even boost morale back home. But here's the problem. Taking a target is one thing, holding it is another. Karg Island is sitting right next to the Iranian mainland, well within range of Iranian missiles, drones, and coastal defenses. If you try to take it and hold it, you're basically setting up an American position that Iran will be attacking constantly, every single day. To protect that position, you'd have to start suppressing threats from the mainland, which means strikes on Iranian territory, which means expanding the war, which means more forces, more resources, more risk. And then you run into the geography. Behind Iran's coastline is some of the most defensible terrain on the planet, mountain ranges like the Zagros that have been shielding Persian armies from invaders for literally thousands of years. Napoleon couldn't conquer Russia's winter. Those mountains have a similar relationship with foreign armies. Sound familiar? It should, because this is the exact same pattern that played out in Vietnam. The US went in with a limited, specific goal, but the situation kept evolving. Each step forward created new problems that required more steps, more troops, more money, more time, more lives. What started as a small operation with clear objectives became the most controversial military engagement in American history, stretching on for years with no clean exit. There's even a psychology term for why this happens. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. The idea is that the more you've already invested in something, money, time, lives, political reputation, the harder it becomes to walk away. Because walking away means admitting that all those previous sacrifices didn't work. And almost no one, especially leaders who made those decisions, wants to admit that. So you keep going, and the avalanche keeps rolling. Here's something else that's important to understand. America's military is built for a specific kind of war. It's built to overwhelm an enemy quickly, what strategists used to call shock and awe, massive air power, precision missiles, rapid dominance. You hit fast, you hit hard, you knock out the enemy's ability to command and coordinate, and then it's over. That worked well against certain types of opponents. The early phase of the 2003 Iraq War, for example, the conventional military part was over in weeks. But Iran has spent decades specifically studying how America fights, and they've designed their entire military strategy around not being vulnerable to that approach. Instead of concentrating their forces where American air power can wipe them out, Iran disperses everything. Mobile units, underground facilities, missile systems hidden in mountains, a network of allied groups spread across multiple countries that can create problems for America from different directions simultaneously, drones that are cheap to make and hard to stop. Think of it like trying to play whack-a-mole, except the moles have studied the game for 40 years and know exactly where to pop up to cause maximum confusion. America has aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS Gerald Ford, that are among the most powerful weapons platforms ever built. Just one of those ships carries more firepower than most entire countries. But in a conflict specifically designed to threaten those ships with large numbers of missiles, swarms of drones, submarines, those carriers also become enormous, expensive things that commanders have to be very careful about risking. The same asset that represents power also represents vulnerability. None of this means America would automatically lose. That would be an exaggeration. But it means the just go in and win quickly option is almost certainly not on the table. A conflict with Iran would be complicated, expensive, long, and unpredictable. And the longer it goes, the more dominoes start to fall. So, what's the answer? Okay, deep breath. Let's zoom way out. America can't cleanly exit under pressure without triggering economic chaos. It can't negotiate without giving up things that would devastate its global position. It can't just win quickly because the nature of this conflict doesn't allow for quick, clean victories. So what do you do when every obvious option is bad? The honest answer, the one that actually makes sense when you look at history, is that you have to play a completely different game. Instead of thinking, how do we win this war, you start thinking, how do we create conditions where the war doesn't have to keep escalating? That means diplomacy, real diplomacy, not just we called them and they didn't answer. Actual negotiations, probably involving multiple countries as intermediaries, China, Russia, European nations, all of whom have their own interests in how this ends. You bring in more players, you build more off-ramps. It means rethinking how you use economic tools. Sanctions have been America's go-to pressure move for decades, but decades of sanctions on Iran clearly didn't prevent this situation. At some point, you have to ask whether the tool is actually working or whether it's just making the problem worse. It means accepting, maybe for the first time in a long time, that America cannot control every outcome everywhere in the world. That other major powers, China, Russia, regional powers like Iran, have interests that need to be acknowledged and managed rather than just overridden. That doesn't mean giving those countries everything they want. It means recognizing that trying to dominate every situation by force is a strategy that keeps creating new quagmires. The goal shifts. It's no longer how do we win? It's how do we get to a situation that's stable enough that we're not in constant crisis? That's not a satisfying Hollywood ending. There's no dramatic victory speech. There's no moment where the hero wins and everyone goes home happy. History rarely works that way. But it might be the only path that doesn't lead somewhere far worse. So here's the big picture. America is trapped. Not because of one bad decision, but because of how wars develop momentum, how the global economy is interconnected, and how modern conflicts are fought. The options aren't good versus bad. They're bad versus potentially catastrophic. And the pressure to do something dramatic can sometimes lead countries into exactly the kind of mission creep that turns a difficult situation into a generational nightmare. The most important question isn't, is America winning or losing? The most important question is, can America figure out a smarter way to play this before the avalanche gets too big for anyone to stop? That question doesn't have an easy answer, but understanding why it's the right question to ask, that's where you have to start. If you made it this far, you actually understand this conflict better than most people who argue about it online. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments, what do you think America should do? I actually read those. Let's talk about it. And if you want to keep following how this all unfolds, because this situation is moving fast and there's a lot more to cover, hit subscribe. Every time there's a major development, we break down here. You don't want to miss what comes next.